I found it!
What? What did you find?
I found it! After all this time!
What? What did you find?
I found my YouTube password again! Hi everyone, Focie here in case you need a reminder. It's been a while. I want to start by saying that I'm going to try to start making videos again. Yes, regularly. I've been stuck in a bit of a creative rut where I'm constantly second-guessing myself on every video idea I've ever had, because I keep running into a big fundamental issue with me as a content creator or whatever. I am not particularly funny, so I can't really do comedy reviews. I mean, I'll try to be funny in videos, but I don't think I'm very funny. I'm also not a particularly good writer either, so I keep asking myself why I even want to throw my voice into a discussion that already has the points I want to make. Or a discussion I'm so late to the party on that the discussion is over and the guests have already gone home. I used to think that this meant that I had to keep one-upping myself in every video, either script-wise or quality-wise, but that had the unintended effect of making everything so incredibly daunting when it came to starting a new video that I could never really bring myself to start for real, you know? So, let's start over fresh, yeah? My name is Focie, and this is my wife, Fox Burrito.
Hi.
You'll likely see her in many a video in the future, and I will do my best to upload a new video around every month. Yes, every month. No guarantees that I'll make it absolutely every single month, but if I don't do it every other month at the very least, kick me in the shins, will you? Also, I do take requests, so if you hear me talk about a topic you'd like me to expand upon, shoot me a message and I'll see what I can do. Today's topic, though, is something that I've been thinking about for... Should maybe mute my phone. Today's topic is something I've been thinking about for a while. It's definitely one of those conversations nobody's having anymore, but I kind of wanted to toss in my 2 cents and see where they lead anyway. Have you ever thought about what makes you buy into a game? I remember this being a question posed way back in the day by the channel Extra Credits, back when Dan Floyd used to be the dude on the podium. There was definitely something about the way they talked about games as both an artistic medium, but also as products that really taught me a lot about how gaming content could and should be discussed. I highly recommend watching their stuff, and hey, Dan himself still has a wonderful channel where he talks about animation in games. It's really interesting stuff, so I highly recommend it. Anyway, all that is to say that I'm kind of basing this script on stuff I heard from that video like 10 years ago. 12 years? It's been 12 years since this video dropped? Feel my bones crumble into dust here. In any case, in the episode called Technobabble, they mention how talking about midichlorians doesn't help people suspend their disbelief at all for Star Wars, and that argument, for as simple as it is, has honestly stuck with me these past 12 years. So, to reiterate, what makes you buy into a game? That means believing and accepting this new universe and its rules. In Star Wars, you really did not need to hear about midichlorians to accept the Force. That was just something you had to accept in order to enjoy the movie to begin with, and it did not need explaining. But why doesn't it need explaining, though? What makes a Pokemon player go and catch God and then have God beat up little worms in the woods without any other thought than, yes, this is actually the coolest fucking thing in the world, instead of questioning why a 10-year-old can just command God around? What makes certain semi-historical games like Civilization have people embrace the Gandhi nukes everything meme instead of decrying it? All the while some games that aren't all that known for historical accuracies have people complain about the inclusion of female protagonists in like their World War II shooter game. So this is obviously a topic that doesn't necessarily have any right answers, as opinions vary from person to person, but even so, I can't help but feel compelled to explore it further. What is it about make-believe that makes you believe? What makes people suspend their disbelief? There are a couple of great series I could use to explain this phenomenon. Why does an ultimately tiny moon that doesn't move very fast make me feel like the world is ending and fill me with such a sense of dread? Why does it make perfect sense to me that this kid has the hearts of like at least 3 people inside of him? Ultimately though, I feel like the Metal Gear Solid series is the perfect example of a franchise I could use as a lens through which we can explore this phenomenon. It should go without saying that this video will go into certain spoilers for the entire series, so you're hereby warned. But before we start analyzing Metal Gear Solid, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what suspension of disbelief actually is. Suspension of disbelief means that a reader, viewer, player, or whatever will accept the more fantastical elements of a story without it interfering with immersion. When Link, in Ocarina of Time, plays the ocarina, we don't complain that it's completely unrealistic that he suddenly learns how to play a song, even though he has barely touched one prior to this. I mean, have you tried playing one of these? It's really frickin' hard. Additionally, when Link plays the ocarina, there's some magical stuff that happens too. Some sparkles here and there, maybe even a shiny border. But the discussion around the ocarina songs are never if this is immersion breaking or not. Heck, it's not even if the magic and borders are diegetic or not. By the way, diegetic or non-diegetic just means if it happens physically in the game world or not. Typically, background music is an example of non-diegetic elements in a game. You can't just pan the camera to the side and find the whole band playing the background music you're currently jiving to.
Oh yeah? What was that then?
Wait a second, that's actually a good point. Was that diegetic or was it not? But because you have the... Let's see, okay, carry to 2. Calculate the mass of the sun. If you follow the Mixolydian scale and music, you get the... I don't know. But someone whistling a song in a game definitely is part of the world. In our case, nobody cares if this magical effect actually shows up in the physical game world when Link doots away on the thing. This is the sort of thing we just accept when we enter a game world and know we're in for an adventure. It is completely unrealistic and improbable, but we typically don't mind it at all. When your immersion breaks, it's because the world has set up some rules that later get broken. The rules, or logic of the world, if you will, is set up and interpreted by the player either intentionally or unintentionally. But we will start intuiting some internal logic the world is running on sooner or later. In Zelda, the internal logic of the game world makes sense here. You're told that you have an ocarina that's kind of magical, and so when you play a teleportation song, you teleport by means of magical light swirls. This just makes perfect sense for this universe. Yeah, you know what wouldn't make sense? Imagine if Link's body contorted as he morphed into some sort of helicopter that can fly off at Mach 3 speeds. As stupid and maybe cool as that sounds, it absolutely wouldn't feel like it fits the world. Even if it is a kind of magic and functionally does the exact same thing as teleportation does in terms of game mechanics. It's fast travel at the end of the day. You wouldn't have Link do that. You wouldn't have Mario do that, and you wouldn't have Yoshi do... Oh. Well, I guess Yoshi does that. So, hopefully we're on the same page now. No, Josh, I see you. You're just off looking at the pictures in the book. We're supposed to be on the same page here. Turn to page 12. This joke is fucking stupid. What am I even doing? We've got a fairly realistic foundation the series is built upon. Metal Gear Solid 1 takes place on a fictional archipelago in Alaska. It has modern weaponry like in real life, and it revolves around a group called Foxhound who stages an insurrection at a nuclear facility and uses the threat of nuclear weaponry to have their demands met. This is an interesting setup that is easy enough to imagine could have happened at some point. And so it falls in line with our assumption that this is, for the most part, a plot that happens in the real world. This is great because a solid foundation means that you can build a lot upon it. Through the art of foreshadowing, you're already told in the briefing in the very beginning that Solid Snake, the protagonist, and Liquid Snake, the antagonist, look almost identical to each other, barring a few details like skin tone and such. So it does not come as too much of a surprise when you later in the game hear that he's your brother. You also hear a lot of stuff about the soldiers in the base undergoing gene therapy to increase their combat prowess. So the story already sets up the rules of the universe. Gene therapy, gene manipulation not only exists, but it's way further ahead than anything in the real world. But this is something that could still be a possibility someday. The internal logic has been set, so it doesn't seem far-fetched at all when you later find out that Solid and Liquid Snake are more than just brothers. They're lovers. Oh, sorry. That one came from one of the fanfics Fox has been reading.
Huh? No, that's not true at all.
No, they're actually clones of Big Boss, the remains of whom are conveniently part of the insurgents' demands. This stuff has been foreshadowed, so the player won't be taken out of the experience when the twists start coming. The internal rules of the universe that were set have not been broken. In other words, the ocarina doesn't turn you into a helicopter, to circle back to the previous metaphor. Now, this twist is well established, but not entirely without some problems. It becomes a little harder to accept when they start talking about dominant and recessive genes without any indication that they work differently in this universe than they do in the real world. As such, the player has to assume that the gene concept is the same as we have in our real world. And you sadly only need a middle school science class to understand that dominant and recessive genes don't really work like this at all. Especially not when you find out that the blonde guy actually was the one with all the dominant genes, and the brown-haired guy was the one with all the recessive genes. I can't tell if this is an oversight or not, but it feels a little bit off. Does this ruin the experience? Maybe a little, but the tricky thing about suspension of disbelief is that the stuff that takes you out of the experience might not do the same with others. Of course, this isn't because they're stupid and can't see the flaws or anything, but honestly, it's more likely than not simply because they don't mind it as much as you do. In other words, everyone's limits are different. In my case, I can find myself accepting a lot of weird stuff in stories because it's honestly more fun to actually get lost in an experience, and I can see that some concessions have to be made exactly because it is a game. It's like there's a clear dividing line in my mind between what I'm supposed to take seriously and what is there to aid the player. So I just kind of shrug when the Colonel tells me to use the triangle button to climb a ladder. I'm also willing to bet that you shrug stuff like this off too. It's weird, isn't it? It breaks the fourth wall by referring to a button on your controller. And even if you ignore that, it's just absurd that the absolute super soldier that Solid Snake is, who's been sent in to deal with a dangerous group that has nukes, needs to be told how to climb a ladder. But we don't care. We know the language of games, and we know that they have to convey the information somehow. A button prompt would have worked, but it's actually kind of interesting now that I think about it, that they decided to convey information with voiced codec calls, and I'm going down a rabbit hole here. I gotta refocus. Okay. Many of the situations that can ruin your immersion in games often occur when the story clashes with the gameplay. Like how a character might die in a cutscene in an RPG, but nobody thinks about using the revive magic that you've been using all this time during gameplay. Or this used to be fairly common. You can kick a boss's ass when you fight it. But you lose handily in the cutscene that plays right afterwards. But there are also gameplay elements that might ruin your immersion. Invisible walls are often common practice in games, but they can absolutely make a game's world feel less believable. Oftentimes, designers will try their best to work around these issues. To circle back to Zelda, Twilight Princess has steep cliffs telling you where you can and cannot go, which is an elegant solution. Though it could kill your sense of discovery a little bit, since you won't have those big Breath of the Wild style, wow, I can really go there and climb that mountain moments. That being said, Breath of the Wild also has its own really distracting invisible walls, but I digress. I am particularly interested in exploring suspension of disbelief when it comes to storytelling, and Metal Gear Solid is the perfect example of having a unique story, but also about how it kind of ruins that later on in the series. At least for me, you know. Stop me if you've seen this picture before. Yeah, it's an older meme, but it checks out. Well, there is a very good reason that people have seen this picture before. In Metal Gear Solid 1, nanomachines are for the most part used to lightly explain why Snake doesn't need to think about his blood sugar, and why he doesn't need to wear warmer clothes in Alaska than his sneaking suit. The injection with the nanomachines also contained an artificially made virus that targets people with a certain genetic makeup. It's not too much for me to handle. It's an adequate explanation as to why Snake can do what he does in the game without realism getting in the way. Sadly, it does not stay this simple. In the fourth game of the series, they explain everything weird or supernatural with nanomachines. Like, look at Naomi Hunter here. She's got cancer and uses her nanomachines to suppress said cancer. At some point though, she injects herself with something that turns these nanomachines off, a suppressant, and she is dead as a doorknob within 5 minutes. Is that how cancer works in this universe? Is this really that fast? And also, why are we told about her cancer only a moment before she dies from it? This really does not adhere to the wonderful foreshadowing from Metal Gear Solid 1. This part comes out of nowhere, and that just makes it a lot harder for me to accept. However, it doesn't stop there. Naomi is here with Vamp, a character we got introduced to in Metal Gear Solid 2. In that game, we see him get shot right in the forehead, but he still returns later to bother you several times during the game. For a while, people seem to believe that his supernatural powers might have something to do with water, because he's always close to water whenever he uses some of his more incredible powers. A tear brings him back to life after being headshot. He has no problem running on water and then straight up a wall and such. We even shoot him with high caliber sniper rounds, sending him into the water, but he still survives. And his boss fight is an arena where normal people should not be able to swim in said water because it's too heavy or something. I don't fully remember, doesn't matter. How does he do all this? What is it about water that has this effect on him? It's a fun little mystery that we might never really get to know the answer to. What's that? They explained it? With what? Nanomachines. In Metal Gear Solid 4, we get our answers. Nanomachines. Ta-da! Yay! So, for those of you keeping count here, nanomachines can regulate your body temperature and blood sugar. They can give you massages through your controller. That one's pretty cool, actually. They can stop cancer from spreading and killing you. They can prevent you from shooting a weapon that you don't have a license for. And they can also revive you from getting shot in the face. This one, I've gotta admit, I find a little hard to accept. What's the limit for regeneration for Vamp? They're in his blood, so is it possible to drain his blood to empty him of nanomachines? Can he regenerate a lost limb? Why is Raiden ever only stabbing him instead of dismembering him? And why does this plot point make me think of such macabre things? Why does Raiden have to stay in a dialysis machine for hours while Vamp can seemingly regenerate just fine as long as his toenail remains? I think what surprises me the most about this whole explanation is that for some reason, I think the water theory seems to hold more water. Even if it is absolutely ridiculous that water is the driving force behind Vamp's supernatural powers, I think I would have been able to accept that for a couple of reasons. First, I feel like these powers didn't really need to be so thoroughly explained in the first place. You've got tons of villains whose powers were mostly just glossed over, and that was fine. You don't need to explain the Force with midichlorians. You just need to set up what it vaguely is and let people fill in the blanks with their own theories. Second, the water might have been a coincidence, but it sure felt like foreshadowing to me, building up to something really cool. Explaining these things a few games later down the line when people kind of already had accepted it and moved on, only makes things worse. Like, can you imagine if they tried to take some of the beloved bosses in Metal Gear Solid 3 and later explain their powers in a thoroughly terrible fashion? That'd only cheapen Metal Gear Solid 3 in hindsight, right? Luckily, they wouldn't do anything like that, right? Oh, hey, what's this gun doing here? Well, better put it over here where it doesn't bother anyone. Ultimately, nanomachines are pretty science fiction in this universe, so they can do pretty much what the writers need them to do without it becoming absolutely impossible to accept. But do you want to hear something that isn't science fiction mumbo jumbo? parasites. Metal Gear Solid 5 decides that it's a little too early in the timeline to start blaming everything supernatural on nanomachines, so they introduce the concept of parasites instead. And this makes the issue very obvious to me. We know how parasites work. Some can do some freaky stuff, absolutely, but they will not give you rock skin. They will not make you invisible to the naked eye. They will not let you create a mist that rusts metal immediately, and they do not let you shoot out stone pillars to attack. Seriously, just like with Vamp, I would be fine if they had just explained it with magic or something, but they keep trying to explain stuff like this with things that are pretty well understood already. I'm sorry, Metal Gear, but I can accept new words and nebulous concepts about stuff that isn't widely known, like nanomachines, but you can't just expect me to replace something as concrete and understood as parasites, right? You know this is weird, right? The thing that's so fascinating to me about this is that we actually have two characters we can directly compare when it comes to this stuff. The End from Metal Gear Solid 3 and Quiet from Metal Gear Solid 5. They are both snipers, both have similar supernatural powers, but Metal Gear Solid 5 goes the extra mile to explain stuff. While The End somehow harnessed photosynthesis to keep his body alive, assumedly through his moss-covered camouflage, Quiet breathes through her skin and gets energy from sunlight because she has parasites that'll allow her to do that. I don't know, I vastly prefer the kind of hand-waved away explanation here in Metal Gear Solid 3, because it doesn't really matter why The End here uses photosynthesis. Or honestly, even if it's true to begin with, or just some kind of urban legend told about this old dude. Snake has believed stupider things and gotten benefits from it, so it's honestly just kind of funny, but not in an immersion-breaking way.
I'm so glad the batteries work.
Paramedic,
What's up?
you were right.
About what?
I ate a Russian glow cap and it charged up my batteries.
Huh?
I am so glad that The End's powers aren't overtly explained. He has what? Oh fuck, that gun just went off. That wasn't even the third act. Yeah, apparently The End's powers and Quiet's powers are so similar because they explain in Metal Gear Solid 5 that The End has always had parasites that gave him these powers. And Quiet has the same kind of parasites, which explains their similarities. This was never mentioned in Metal Gear Solid 3, and that was fine. It didn't need to be. Why would you try to explain it now? It's not important, and you're only cheapening the older game. Oh, and it gets worse too. This new explanation serves to further break the internal logic the game has set up. Like, okay, if they had the same parasites, how come he's wearing a big-ass camo suit, and she needs to be nearly naked because she breathes through her skin? By the way, while I'm on the tangent of comparing the two, with The End, you were basically told that he was really old and that he was a really good sniper, and that was more or less it. With Quiet, you got the whole shebang. She breathes through her skin. She's a biological weapon if she starts to speak English, and she is so utterly amazing as a sniper that it honestly sounds like a joke when you say it out loud. The End was a good sniper, even one of the best. But Quiet just shatters the suspension of disbelief for me by shooting a dude in a jet fighter while being in a moving helicopter, while Snake is sitting right there next to her, rattling off a mounted machine gun so hard I'd expect the helicopter to start falling apart already, while the jet fighter is in the middle of an alien roll, some impossible distance away. Like, geez, Kojima, chill. There are other ways to show that Quiet is an exceptional sniper. It's so weird too because it sounds so cool in any other scenario. But since the game insists on using real-world locations, real-world conflicts, and real-world logic for so much of it, that it doesn't meld well when they break away from the real-world stuff and starts doing more of the fantastical things. And while I'm at it, how can Miller give you a detailed status report on whatever you're looking at?
That looks like the target.
When he's blind? Also, why was that a reveal at the end of the game? It wasn't really foreshadowed at all. He wore sunglasses all the time in Peace Walker because he has photosensitivity, but he wasn't blind. What, was the dramatic reveal supposed to signify that he just has cataracts or something? The Spanish official Metal Gear Solid Facebook account said he's not blind, he only has photosensitivity. Oh, What? Why are his eyes cloudy like that then? All right, I need to stop. Sheesh, God, I swear I go on tangents like a
Durin.
That's really stupid. I think the problem actually comes down to how seriously MGS4 and MGS5 take themselves and their own explanations, at least partially. I remember Kojima even said people who criticized Quiet would feel bad about themselves when they learn her secret backstory, and I'm not feeling ashamed, and I'm not buying it. Metal Gear Solid has always been a franchise with serious tones, but usually never minded having a bit of fun to balance out the seriousness. This is, for instance, what makes the Yakuza series so incredible today. Metal Gear Solid 4 still has a lot of this, which works to his advantage, but it still falls back to explaining away everything with nanomachines, and the suspension of disbelief hinges on you accepting that nanomachines now can do all the things that they do. I think it's a little bit of a shame that they were written as the be-all, end-all solution to everything, so of course they became a meme. So you have to ask yourself, we've got Metal Gear games that balance silly and serious. We've also got Metal Gear games that are serious to a fault. What would happen if we had a Metal Gear game that doesn't take itself seriously at all when it tries to explain nanomachines and superpowers and all that jazz? Too bad we'll never find... You get Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. Holy goddamn, this game is completely whack. And I love the hell out of it. It is so over the top that it takes your precious little suspension of disbelief and confidently suplexes it like you would a train in Final Fantasy VI. It knows it's over the top, and it knows it's a game, and the result is a product that is so laser focused on delivering exactly that. An over-the-top fun game. It honestly ends up being nothing but pure badassery, and that's all I can really say. It's obvious the story continuity wasn't the main focus here because they do whatever they want here. Raiden can suddenly lift thousands of metric tons? Sure, why not? As long as it looks badass, go for it. It's honestly really liberating to play a game like this, where most of the humor is so dorky that I can't help but adore it. But most of all, I have no issue immersing myself in this game and story, even if that isn't the focus, and even if it's weird as all hell. Maybe there's some kind of uncanny valley for storytelling that is working behind the scenes here. And in fear of regurgitating another extra credits video at you, the uncanny valley is a concept explaining how much appeal something has based on how human it looks. I recommend checking out their original video for a thorough explanation. I'm just speedrunning this one. Left side, not human, not much response. Middle left, some humanity, it still stands out and we like it. Peak left, lots of humanity but still stylized. We adore it. This valley right here, too much humanity, spooky. Peak right, now it's so human we can't really tell the difference anymore and all is good. I really wonder if there's a similar concept out there for suspension of disbelief. Take for instance how Metal Gear Solid 3 is serious in tone when meeting Volgin, but still dares to be silly as all hell like when meeting Volgin. Again. As a whole, Metal Gear Solid 3 explains a ton, but doesn't explain everything and thereby leaves room for interpretation and theory crafting. If we're going with an uncanny valley of over-explaining stuff, which I guess we kind of are since I'm bringing it up, I'd place it around this spot in the appeal graph. And then you've got Metal Gear Solid 4 and 5, which both explain a lot, but are way too serious for their own good. Raiden can stop this huge ship with tons of momentum by stabbing his foot with a sword while he was barely able to stand a few minutes ago. If this had been a fun story, I would have been all hell yeah, but they take themselves so seriously that it takes me right out of it. Which would make it end up somewhere around here on the scale. And then, finally, you'd end up with Rising, which also explains everything on nanomachines, but also just goes ham with it and knocks it out of the park because it's just so extremely silly. And it ends up around here on the appeal graph. Okay, actually, maybe the graph shouldn't be with a dip here. Maybe it's more of a tone versus appeal versus how much it explains, which means that these are 3 variables and therefore it should be a 3D graph. And you know what? I'll leave this analogy behind right now. Maybe one of you guys can explain it better than I can. I hope this whole thing has at least explained why suspension of disbelief is such a strange topic. We know that a universe has to adhere to the logic it has built up, but it also seems like tone plays a huge part in it too. And also, when those story elements are introduced, foreshadowing is huge. We also know that the threshold is different for everyone, so I'm actually super curious about how you guys would experience things. Maybe Metal Gear Solid 5 is easy for you guys to buy into, and I'm just a bitter old fool. I'll be in the comments hashing this out with you guys if you're interested. Fair warning, I'm probably way off by talking about the Uncanny Valley for storytelling, but maybe my insane ramblings make sense to some of you. What kind of games have you played where you just couldn't buy into the story? In the meantime, I gotta sign this video off. Thank you very much for watching. It's good to be back, to be honest. Anyway, you guys rule. You seriously do. I am sure you could have beaten Senator Armstrong even without your nanomachines. So, have a good one, guys. Say goodbye, folks.
Goodbye, Fox.
Ha det bra. Huge thanks to Fox Burrito, the love of my life, for being such a trooper when it comes to art, and when it comes to dealing with me as well. And also a big, great thanks to Kefa for keeping me company and giving me input when I've been editing. It really helps, dude.